I love Monster Hunter games. Saying I'm an avid fan feels like a crime though, as my first game, like millions of others, was World. But seeing as how I've played Rise, my YouTube icon is a poorly photoshopped Rajang, and I made this video, it's safe to say my love for the series didn't end there. Today, I'm going to do a deep analysis of what I have found both games did well and which game is better. Please remember this is all entirely my opinion, and you are entitled to believe the opposite of what I believe. I love both games astoundingly, and these are simply my findings from casually playing both titles. Hey guys, my name's Darth Deku. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my first video ever, and I really hope you like it. If you're a fan of Monster Hunter, anime, whatever, I would highly suggest subscribing, completely free. Change your mind later. And leave a comment down below on anything I bring up in this video. I'd like to see your guys' viewpoint and if you agree or not. I believe we should kick this off with the game that came chronologically first, Monster Hunter World. And I sing praises for this game. It was an amazing game. I loved every second of it, minus the extremely long loading screens. Whatever platform you were on, you can't deny it. It had huge long loading screens, and I'm going to point this out now. A lot of my points I'm going to bring up might just sound like little nitpicks, but it's really important to look at both materials and what both games had. Because I'll be honest, in Rise, everything loads absurdly fast, and that's really something that's underlooked sometimes, but I digress. Let's get to some of the praises for World. It's in the title, Monster Hunter World. It's the game feels like a world. Each locale you go into, tons of diverse creatures, be it large, small, want to kill you or not. It feels like an ecological environment. Great Jagras, for example, the literal first large monster you hunt in World, the way he is incorporated into the environment, it's really neat. You can literally just put on a ghillie mantle, walk around, and watch these monsters in their environment. And they do so much, more than you could imagine. And a lot of this is important to the incorporation of the scout flies that were introduced in Monster Hunter World. Now with the scout flies, you can track monsters and find them a lot faster than you could by bumbling around, searching forever on the map. And because of the scout flies and you needing to research things the monsters do, well, in turn, the monsters have to do stuff. An example, Anjanath spitting some mucus on a tree. I think that's really, really cool. I mean, yes, it's just some fucking mucus on a tree, but, like, they don't have that in Rise. And we'll touch more on it when I get to Rise, but Rise feels a lot less world-like. And I mean that in terms of it being an ecosystem. The maps in Rise just feel more like levels in a game, which technically they are, but compared to what we had the game prior, it's very noticeable. But I digress. My next point I want to bring up for World is the story. Now, I think there's pros and cons to the story. Pros, it gives us a reason to be fighting all these monsters in a row like we are. We're exploring the new world, we're exploring all these new locations, and we're going to come into some roadblocks in the form of large monsters that want to rip our head off. So we have to fight back, and that is why we are going through and fighting all these monsters like we are. Whereas in Rise, you simply just pick a monster, kill it, and then again, and then something comes up. That's really the whole progression of the story. With World, it's a plot. With Rise, it's a roadblock that is gatekeeping you from more harder challenges, which I prefer over Rise. I prefer the progressing because we have to, not because we need to, if that makes any sense. Cons of the story, though, is it's kind of dry. The story, it's kind of boring, empty, and the more you look at the story, the more you can see all the plot holes, and if you just ask questions, you're never going to get answers. So, story's got flaws, as most stories do. Next praise for Monster Hunter World, and this is a big one, is it's a graphical masterpiece. You look at World and Rise is the more recent game, you know, it's a literal nitpick, but you'd assume going forward they would keep up the graphics. Now, I get it, Rise is only available on a Switch, and the Switch and PC, but originally on the Switch, and there's only so much you can do with the Switch's hardware, which I completely understand, but still, it's a real bummer when you go from World's graphics to Rise's, and again, that's a literal nitpick, but like I said, you have to look at both sides of the story here to get the full picture. My next praise for World is the reintroduction of monsters, specifically in Iceborne. After I beat the story in normal World, I went on the internet, looked up a bunch of stuff on the older games, and I saw all these amazing and these cool monsters, and I was like, wow, I wish I could fight those things, but you know, I don't have all these old consoles, and I can't play those, and you know, some Monster Hunter games are only in Japan. That's why I was super hyped in Iceborne to see some of these said monsters in their trailers. They're bringing them back. That's amazing. And I give the point to reintroducing monsters to World versus Rise because of prior points. Not just graphics, but the fact that it's a literal world that these new monsters are in. For example, in Iceborne, the introduction of the snowy place, I forgot the name of, but I'll put it up on screen. Barioth, a returning monster, is supposedly the apex of that zone. And that's cool. It puts them into the ecological chain, and it gives them purpose versus just saying, hey, we want the snow leopard dragon back. And I think that's dope. Versus in Sunbreak, where we get some monsters back, and they don't have that much detail. They don't have that level of love and care. Gormagala, for example, in Sunbreak. I always wanted to fight Gormagala. The fact that he was brought back is amazing, but his role in the game and in the story is minimal at best. He's literally just a roadblock. They do nothing with his amazing gimmicks, with his frenzy virus. I wish they hyped it up in a way where it's like, oh my goodness, Hunter, it's Gormagala, the Gormagala. We have to bring our A game now. This is a huge threat. If he becomes Shagaru-Magala, we are toast. But none of that. It's simply an option to fight him, and I think it's pretty sad. My next pro to World is the exquisite locales, and a lot of them are just beautiful. Okay, this is tying into the graphical masterpiece point I made, but they made beautiful locations. Now, we had our generic forest level, our generic sand level, but the one right after, Coral Highlands. Such a beautiful idea. Someone at Capcom said, you know, coral, that's a beautiful phenomena in the world. We should base that on a location, and boom, here's the Coral Highlands. And I think that's super dope. It's such a beautiful location, and it's done so well. And the location in tandem with the Coral Highlands, the Rotten Vale, is equally as dope. You know, it's got a whole underbelly where it's noxious, and there's effluvium, and there's an upper zone where it's not as dangerous, but you still feel that sense of dread and terror. The whole zone, everywhere around you, everything's dead. The things that are alive are taking advantage of the things that are dead, and it's a real ecosystem, and I love that. I love it. And Elder's Recess, it's a pretty basic lava zone with a bunch of beautiful crystals, though. The things they did with the basic zones is still beautiful, like the crystals or the giant tree you can scale in the ancient forest, for example. Stuff like that. It's wonderful, wondrous, and not to mention the Guiding Lands, which is post game, and it's just a collage of everywhere you've been before, and every monster in the game can spawn here, and I think that's so cool, because you're taking all these existing ecological zones putting together, and you're pitting the best of the best from each zone against each other, and monsters that would have never seen each other see each other. Like, let's say, for example, Namiel and Great Jagras. When would they ever? They wouldn't, until then. And those are basically all my points for Monster Hunter World, and with that in mind, let's get into Rise. Monster Hunter Rise was a game I wasn't too keen on getting at first, because it just looked so different from World. The graphics were an obvious downgrade, and a lot of what I liked from World just didn't seem to be there. But eventually I gave in, and I needed to fill my Monster Hunter crave. So I got Monster Hunter Rise, and it was fun. It's a really good game. My favorite part about Rise, and this will be the first point, is the weapons and the wire bugs. They perform together so well. I love the use of these wire bugs as a meter for a super move of sorts from your weapon. I think weapons were missing that kind of oomph in World, and the fact that we got that in Rise is amazing. The use of them for dodging is really, really useful, and when you get knocked over, wire falling to get away after a knockdown is also really, really cool. My next point for Monster Hunter Rise is the inclusion of Palamutes and the ability to upgrade your buddies, whether it be dog or cat. And I think they're pretty good. The way they went with Rise, the direction they went in, with a fully huge open world where you can scale these mountains and whatnot, it was apparent that the player needed another method of movement faster than the traditional sprint, and this comes in the form of the Palamute. But instead of just a mount, they are also a great hunting companion. They are strong, and you can give them specific abilities to make them stronger, and you can tweak them to your desire. I think it's pretty neat. And then there's also the ability to upgrade your buddies, which includes the Palicos, where they get a sort of skill tree that you can change as they go along. The more they level up, the more spots you can assign. And it seems really weird at first, but it's when you look at it and you see the implications of it, and you can really appreciate it. For example, in my Rise, I gave my cat the ability to negate stun or sleep. I don't remember which one exactly, but it was one of those negate status effects, and it seems kind of useless, but you gotta think about it. You and your cat and your dog are grouped up, the monster shoots some sleep gas, you're getting drowsy, you're about to go to sleep, your dog's about to go to sleep, but your cat is fine. Whereas without that buff, they would have also fallen asleep, and you or all of you would have been hit. But your cat stays awake and can nudge you out of your sleep, walk, and you are able to perform out of it, and that's really cool. My next point that I want to bring up for Rise is the final boss. So spoilers if you haven't played Sunbreak and you still want to, and you want to experience that final boss. If not, I'm going to continue. This is Geismagorm, and I love Geismagorm. His spectacle, it's absurd. It's amazing. Granted, he had what appeared to be no integration in the story, but I guess he was there all along, and that cutscene you got just before fighting him was amazing. It was so cool, and you don't really grasp how big he is until you fall into the arena with him. And his second phase, it's literally gorgeous. It's amazing. I love him so much more than Shar Ishvalda. You can't change my mind. And now we're moving on to my first meh point. It's not really a point in a good direction or a bad direction for Rise. It's just weird, in my opinion, and it's the concept of a fully open world where we can go on top of these mountains and there's all these side zones. It's odd. I like it. It's just they went into more of a direction of using the endemic life to your advantage. And I think it's okay with like the existing ones we had before, Paratoads, Sleep Toads, Blast Toads, using them again. But Spirit Birds, I don't know if that was a good call. I think it's kind of what makes the game a little easier, because I, for one, accidentally found a route which I can take, and I get max health in the Shrine Ruins. So it's like a handicap, and if you can exploit it, you can do great things with it. But I don't know if we needed that in Rise, to be honest. I think it'd be better if they went with a more traditional, just your power is what matters, versus using Spirit Birds at all. This is gonna kind of pour into another point, which I'll make now, I guess. It makes the game feel more arcade-like. The game doesn't feel like how World did, where the world is a world. It's an ecosystem, but that's not the case in Rise. In Rise, there's a monster in a spot. If you enter the same zone as the monster, they instantly aggro you. Well, at least until they see you, they instantly aggro you. And you hurt them, and then they run off to the next zone. We'll take Tobi-Kadachi for an example. He's my best example for this point. Tobi-Kadachi is actually passive in World. You can walk with them, you can chill with them. It's amazing. You can just walk with this beast, and he doesn't do anything until you hit him. But in Rise, that's not the case anymore. Tobi-Kadachi must have had some hormones kick up or something, because he's a dick now. And it's kind of sad. It was really cool, but they changed it. Another example, I guess, in World, Anjanath, he will just slowly patrol the Ancient Forest until you start your fight with him. Then he'll run from zone to zone, traditional Monster Hunter fight style, like that. But it's not how it is in Rise. In Rise, a monster will be in a zone, it'll just be chilling, and then when it wants to go to another zone, it's gonna bum rush to the next zone. It doesn't just slowly patrol or go at their leisure. They run to each zone, and I think that's really weird. At least compared to, World, and I think it's pretty sad. This is my final point for Rise, but I think the game is oodles easier. And I've seen the point brought up before with other people, where is it really the game's easier, or we as players are just better at the game? Me replaying World? No. The game is definitely easier. Even ignoring just simple gameplay like, oh, the monsters don't do as much damage, or the player has more health, or the Spirit Birds, or the inclusion of Palamutes, just ignoring all of those, which are all apparent. Another smaller thing I noticed is decorations. It's a lot easier to make decorations in Rise than it is in World. In World, you'll just get a random drop from a quest, and it'll turn into a random gem. And then, if you want a specific one, you have to sacrifice a bunch of these random gems to get one of your desire. In Rise, you simply bring the blacksmith 3 items, and boom, you can make a decoration. In World, your decoration box gets cluttered, and you're not even going to use half of these decorations ever, but in Rise, it's more slimmed down. You can pick what you want. And I like that, but it makes the game a ton easier. In World, it felt earned. I got this randomly. The attack jewel is commonly brought up for World. It is so hard to get an attack jewel, but you can just make them in Rise. I don't think that's right. I think that makes the game 10 times easier to build whatever loadout you're trying to make super easily like that. And those are basically all my points for Rise, so now I'm going to get into my closer, and I'm going to go over what both games did good. So Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter Rise were both really good games. I really enjoyed them both. They were my step into the series, and the games are fun. If you haven't played either, I suggest you do. I'm going to tell you which one now is my favorite of the two, which one I think is better, and that is Monster Hunter World. Because Rise is a game. World is an experience. That's how I see it. World has so many things I haven't seen another game do. Now, granted, a lot of that could be that's my first Monster Hunter experience. I could be biased there, but you still have to look at all the points I brought up. World, they put so much love and detail into that game. You can't deny that. And I'm not saying Rise is, but Rise feels like a cash grab. Like, I'm not saying they didn't put any effort into Rise. It's pretty apparent with the wire bugs and the infinite possibilities of weapon loadouts you can do. I think World's challenge is fitting. It's you, a human, with your cat, versus a T-Rex. Like, come on, it's not gonna... That technically wouldn't go in your favor, but you have to make it go in your favor. I really, really love both these games, and the music in both of them, they are amazing. The music's amazing. I played some throughout the video. Please check it out. Support the creators. Support Capcom by playing the game. And something else I love about both games is the premise. You know, Monster Hunter has made their own genre of Monster Hunter. You know, it's different than your traditional MMO RPG where you just grind with experience, get stronger. Whereas in World and Rise and throughout the entire series, it's simply you kill these monsters and you literally take parts of their body to make you stronger. And I think that's so cool. That's so cool. And I really think this game needs a larger community. So if this is your first time hearing about either game, please, 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 I urge you, try out either or both. But with all that in mind, I want to say thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, please show some support. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Goodbye.